Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTGO codes, go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get yourself a 5% discount on your orders using the code OmniPoke. For today's video, we're going to be rounding out some of the Cosmic Eclipse brand new decks. This time it's going to be Tangrowth. The new set drops on PTGO tomorrow, so expect future videos to be back on good old PTGO where we can see these decks in a bit more sort of action and playtesting against each other, which is going to be cool. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy some Tangrowth action because I think this is an underrated archetype, you know. It's a stage 1 that only has a single energy attack cost, so it should be relatively easy to chain. It's a grass type, so obviously we can get Netball helping us out for getting early Tangelas as well as energy access throughout the game. And Rosa is just a fantastic supporter that I really am a big fan of, especially for non-GX decks, so that sounds very reasonable. Absol really does help buff our damage. If you didn't know, Tangrowth's attack is all based around your opponent's retreat cost. So Absol being able to punish all sorts of basics out there right now. It really is a basic heavy format. I think even more so with things like Tag Whistle coming out from the new set. That we're going to try and punish them very easily. And at the same time, we sort of get the added benefit of punishing Jirachi engines, which is everywhere right now. As we know, a bunch of tag team decks are trying to use Stellar Wish as much as possible just to be consistent. And we disrupt that quite happily, which is pretty awesome. I'm also happy to say that Ultra Beasts, I think, are getting way more relevant again. We saw them be absolutely core in Zap Beast for a long time. They've kind of got a little bit less popular just because, you know, trying to combine them on the right turn when we don't have as good search options and trying to combine it with like custom catchers makes some of these cards like way weaker. But now we have great catcher. Things like Baby Buzzwole picking off the Denes will be very commonplace now. Seeing as though you can do the whole combo with one Rosa, you can go, I'll grab a Fighting Energy, a Buzzwole, and a Great Catcher on your Sledgehammer turn. So that's going to be insane. And obviously good against Pikarom, of course. So that should be pretty decent. Same thing for like Nihilego and stuff. Because we have Rosa now, we can pick them out for the right time and get use of them, which is going to be really awesome. And they offer Power Spike turns and some extra type coverage, which I think is going to be great as well. So I'm happy to see Ultra Beasts sort of become relevant again in this format, and even if it isn't Tangrowth that ends up using them the best, it's definitely good to note that Ultra Beasts get way better. For the Pokemon, we have a 4-4 line of Tangrowth. We're playing the Unbroken Bonds Tangela, not the new one, because it has the Tangle Drag attack. You can switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with that active, which is really awesome. You get to choose, so you can try and trap stuff early game, which is pretty decent. And trapping is a lot more effective when you naturally have so many Absol available because we're maxing that out as well. So this Tangela is awesome. Even if it just bait switches out from the opponent early, it means that when we're stamping them later on, and you know, if you're in a sort of panic situation, you need to trap something with Tangle Drag for a turn, for like a late game push, you can stamp, Tangle Drag, and stuff like that. So that's pretty decent. It also has 10 more hit points than the other one, so I thought it was a no-brainer to go down this route. Because we're going to be trying to trap stuff anyway with Absol, which is pretty sweet. And then we have that main attacker in Tangrowth, you can see on the far left. Grass Knot does 10 base and 30 more for each you know, symbol in the opponent's retreat cost, each energy for their retreat. So we're going to try and buff this. Obviously Absol only works on basics, but like I said, the vast majority of decks out there are basic decks, so we're hopefully going to be ramping that retreat cost up a bunch, look towards, you know, the 5 and 6 sort of category for our damage output, and that's pretty insane for one energy. It really is awesome, especially when we have Shrine and stuff on top of that to make things even more painful for the opponent. So hopefully we're going to be dealing with Dedenes in one hit if we've had Shrine on our side at the very least. And we can be two-shotting tag teams even with the bits of heal that they can have here and there, which I think is awesome. We have the Ditto Prism Star as a one of. We also play one copy of Zebstrika. This is just because I don't want to lose to Pidgeotto Control. I think it's a good enough deck in the format that it's going to see a lot of play. So being a 5th Tangela against everything else, and then Zebstrika against exactly Pidgeotto, or in matchups where you just feel like you need that extra bit of draw, Ditto into Zebstrika is never that bad. So I like having the 1-1 line there. We're playing 3 of our own Jirachi just to help us get towards supporters turn 1 and whatnot, and just make sure that we can sort of chain our attackers. You never really put more than one Jirachi down into play, but it's always a welcome sight in those opening turns. And then we have a bunch of one-offs. We have the new Mimikyu with that shadow box. It's going to be really interesting to see how many decks actually end up playing this card and how many people need to like instantly respond to it with playing healing options or playing stealthy hoods and stuff like that. It is going to be an interesting back and forth for this new Cosmic Eclipse meta, but I think right now it definitely makes sense in this deck. There's definitely some powerful abilities that we can shut off. Mewtwo's a big one. I think some of the other big ones include Weavile. Zeraora is actually one of the most scary abilities because they put the retreat cost down to 0, so our damage output is terrible until we get the Mimikyu and the Shrine working against things like Pikarom. Also, there's things like the Silvally that can reduce retreat cost to 0 as well for basics, and again, that's hell for us to deal with, so this Mimikyu is actually a super important card. We then have the one copy of Buzzwole, Sledgehammer being absolutely busted against Denes, Pikarom, and just in general just being a nice power spike turn. And then we have the Nihilego, Nightcap as well, obviously very strong. It can give us weakness against Mewtwo, which a lot of the time they won't expect. It's good against things like Flare Strike and a few other attacks out there as well. So this Nihilego also a pretty nice card. Buzzmosa coming in as well, offering us a nice GX attack with that Beast Game GX. Can finish something off and take an additional prize at the same time. If we've been whittling things down with Shrine, you can actually get a decent number of targets in range. And again, when Tangrowth is hitting around that sort of 160, 190 mark with Shrine on top of that, sometimes Beast Game just finishes off a tag team is pretty awesome. At the same time, Jet Punch can be really backbreaking against Malamar, especially when we have this many Absols. It really hurts their early game. If you just put Buzzmosa early and Absol, that combo is actually pretty hard for them to deal with a lot of the time. So you can actually ruin a few Inkays early on in the game, and that can be sometimes a low-key win condition against that matchup. I don't think we're necessarily positive against Malamar, but I think Buzzmosa offering a beast game and at the same time just having like Jet Punch plus Absol early pressure can actually really frustrate them, so I think that's something to bear in mind for sure. Onto the trainers, it's really a simple trainer count, which I think is really awesome. Because we don't really like most of our creativity is just in the Pokemon. Like all these Absols take up a lot of space and stuff, so we just play a couple stamp for disruption. I think when we're already basically making Jirachis way worse for opponents, it makes sense for us to stamp them at the same time. We play 2 switch and 2 board for our own little Jirachi engine. We then have 3 of the new Great Catcher, which is obviously very good for picking up things that we've tried to 2-hit KO or deal with the Denes and stuff, which is awesome. 4 Com and 4 Netball, no-brainers to get our Pokemon rolling, as well as Netball helping us get Grass Energies out of the deck, because we don't play a huge amount of them. And then 3 Shrine of Punishments to activate that Mimikyu, as well as just make our damage output that much better. Again, for non-GX decks, it's just such a great card to be able to have access to. For the supporters, we're going to play 2 copies of the new Rosa. Like I said, I'm a big fan of her. She really makes the Ultra Beasts way stronger, and in general just gets us into more Tangrowth and more energies, which is just really awesome. Then we have 4 Cynthia and 4 Lillie to round things out. You can get a bit more creative with this if you want to. I've thought about a few other supporter options out there, but for now I'm just going for kind of just stable draw options that we know are always reasonable. I like Lillie when you have Netball available. We don't really need to play anything like Oak or anything, but you can do if you want to go down a different route. For energy, we're playing 7 basic grass and 1 copy of Fighting and 1 copy of Psych Energy. Similar to how Zapdos Beasts kind of rounded out their energy counts. This is basically the same as Zap Beasts when they had the Viridian Forest route. Now, of course, we have Rosa, which can pick these out at the right times. I think this is stronger than Rainbow Energy because of that Rosa synergy. You'll normally be using a Rosa anyway to get like the Ultra Beast out on the right turn, so it feels like that's the main synergy that we're looking for. So it kind of makes sense for me to just play the basic energy cards. The rainbows would give us technically more outs towards like grass attachments for the Tangrowth, but I think when you already play, 2 Rosa and 4 Netball and 7 physical grass, it shouldn't ever be a big issue in my opinion. So here is the full list now. Pause if you wish, and we'll move on to some tech options. We still have a couple awkward matchups. I think an Alolan Ninetales, if you are going to play the Rainbow build, could be pretty sick actually. It means that you would have a much better time against Guardian, which is pretty cool. Mew is definitely something that I want to work into this list because I think it will definitely improve our Pikarom matchup. It's something that's kind of missing right now. Power Plant could be an alternative option to the Mimikyu if you're not really impressed by it. And it's definitely a lot safer if things like Pikarom are going to end up playing Stealthy Hood to play around Mimikyu. If they just Hood a Zeraora, like your day is really bad against Pikarom, so the Power Plant is much more secure than the Mimikyu. Then there's the option for Professor Oak's setting. It can obviously get like Ditto, Tangela, and then like an Absol for free, or a Jirachi and stuff, and help you get going. But I think when you have netballs, it's not mandatory to play that. A few other supporter options you could look towards. Things like Erica's Hospitality is always one that you can consider in a low count, or just increasing that, what's it called, Rosa count as well, could be pretty decent. And then there's the question mark of Malamar. Every non-GX deck has to ask themselves that question: can I beat Malamar? Right now, we don't have many answers. If you want to play Lysander Labs and Hooper, that could help you out as well. But at the moment, I haven't committed the space to either of those cards. I feel like Hooper on his own isn't really too different to just playing a Tangrowth. You basically have 10 more hit points with the Hooper thanks to resistance. So it's not like a big enough deal to make an include in my book, because they'll already be committing a bunch of their spell tag damage towards your Tangrowths themselves. And I think just the labs on their own could be a little bit better than adding in the Hoopers, but if you want to win that matchup more, you can definitely look towards these sorts of cards. On the matchup overview, I really do think that Pikarom could be pretty awkward, again, especially if they're going to play like Stealthy Hood for their Zeraora. Again, it kind of depends on how much Mimikyu actually sees play. But I think the Zeraora is in general an awkward card for you to deal with. I also think that at the moment we're not playing Mew, so Tag Bolt is awkward to deal with. I'm hoping that the Buzzwole can surprise people and help us out in that matchup, but at the moment I still think it's pretty rough. Malamar I think is awkward. Obviously we have the Absol that can sometimes buy us free turns, but naturally Malamar normally plays 3 switch, and it should be reasonable for them to still load up cards. Like, they need to set up a bunch of Malamar to still be in the game. But it shouldn't be too difficult for them, and at the end of the day, they still have spell tag damage that can go through us, and they have SBDO and all that jazz. Quagnag, I think, is awkward. Obviously, Absol doesn't increase our damage output against them. We can hit for weakness on the Quagsires, but not the Nags, so I think that could be an awkward matchup. Dark Box is awkward, because they have good old Guzzlord that can take additional prizes against you, which sounds rough. Also, they can oftentimes play Dark City, or Night City. Yeah, Night City, the stadium. So that could be awkward. Florsbuck, Nuzzlechew, Alolan, Ninetales, and Galade all evolution decks, so you don't get the damage buff from Absol. So your damage output is pretty shoddy, and they can just do their sort of main plan A for the most part. So those are all also matchups that I think are pretty rough for you. For my closing thoughts, Absol's great against a lot of the mainstream stuff. And I do think that this deck is more disruptive than you would expect. Like, one Absol is annoying enough for a bunch of decks, but a lot of the time Jirachi can still like manually attach and retreat with its board, or do all these other plays. But when you put 2 and 3 Absols into the equation, it is switch or nothing, and that can be really awkward for a lot of decks. So I really do think it punishes a lot of Stellar Wish engines, which is awesome. Ultra Beasts, seeing those back in the game is going to be awesome. Like, they're some of my favorite cards to play, and I think Rosa supporting them is going to be sick, and I'm going to try and sort of replicate this approach in a few other decks like Spiritomb and stuff. So I think naturally that's going to be pretty cool. So yeah, this is, again, like quite an easy deck. It's not super difficult to get super set up. Your damage output may be a little bit awkward in those opening turns once you've only got like 1 or 2 Absols down into play, but naturally as you draw more cards, find these Absols, your damage output will increase, and I think that's pretty decent. As long as you can avoid other evolution decks, this deck has a chance, I think. So let me know what you guys think about Tangrowth. Have you tried to build it in any other way? I haven't seen many people combine it with Ultra Beast, to be honest, so I think it's a pretty decent option. What other supporters are you considering? How else can we get around some of these awkward things? Like the Zeraora Stealthy Hood or Silvally Stealthy Hood, stuff like that. It's all stuff that I want to get in the discussion down below, so I'll hear it all there. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and get hyped for Cosmic Eclipse on PTGO. It's coming soon.